Hell yeah.
Wow. Hello and welcome in to another episode of My Wheelhouse Basketball on the We Got Balls podcast network. I'm your host, Sheamus McNamara, joined on today, Sunday, January 9th, by the usual dear friend, Steve Trudeau. Steve, how's it living?
Hello. I just want to wish everyone out there happy Clay Day.
Happy Clay Day. Yep, Clay Thompson will be returning in about 25 minutes. First game in 2 years. Very excited. A lot to look forward to. Joined also by additional special guest, returning guest, special friend of the pod, Al Biddies Natola. Biddies, how's it going?
Clay's back in my fantasy lineup. I think might be the move that gets me out of the basement of the league.
You're really holding him up. You know, you're making sure he's on the pedestal. Everyone in the league knows he's for sale. Who's throwing out the best offer? He's available.
That he is. I'll take picks. I'll take young prospects. Or I'll hold on to them.
Picks and young prospects are likely going to be a topic of several discussions we'll be having today, where we are going to focus on the current rebuilding teams in the league, teams at the bottom of the totem pole, which formerly was kind of just sludge and not watchable, but because of recent influx of talent is pretty interesting. And depending on our thoughts on these current rebuilding teams, we may tie in previous rebuilds and just give as much information on that as possible. We're probably going to end the episode with some type of Steve-led trivia. We'll see how that goes. But
yeah, are you familiar with the Right Time podcast with Bomani Jones, one of my favorite podcasts?
I am familiar. I don't listen. Bomani Jones is the only person that blocks me on Twitter, and I don't know why he blocks me on Twitter.
Well, I'll tell you with the block, but it's a reoccurring segment they do. It's called "Are You Still in the League?" So we'll get to that at the very end. That should be fun.
I think that's good. Before we jump into the meat of our podcast, I would love to just do a brief week in review.
Let's check out what happened around the league this week. It's time for My Wheelhouse Rapid Recap.
COVID-19 comes full circle as Rudy Gobert tests positive again for COVID-19. Finally, the Jazz suffer the same fate as the rest of the league. The Toronto Raptors are on a roll, winning 7 of their last 10 games, including their 5th straight, now that their team is at full health. Hero and Duncan Robinson beat the full health Suns 2 nights ago with a combined 60 points. Since LeBron James has begun starting at center for the Los Angeles Lakers, they've won 6 of their last 7, including 4 straight with Malik Monk as their primary scorer. The Boston Celtics and New York Knicks split a home game trip, home and home. Pretty nightmarish on one side and exciting on the other side. And of course, Kyrie Irving had his return against the Indiana Pacers, 22, 3, and 4 in 32 minutes. And the nonsensical blabbery continues as he misses the next 2 games because they were at home. Finally, the great Dirk Nowitzki had his jersey lifted to the rafters down in Dallas with a very peculiar statue, but we give all the respect and love out to Dirk, a deserving Hall of Famer and NBA champion, top 20 player all time.
It's a great recap. I did want to throw out a little something else that I thought was really cool over the week. Lance Stephenson sent at one point to play in China. Guy is tearing it up for the Pacers right now. I believe he came 2 points short of his career high on Wednesday versus the Nets. And then I think last night they played and he had 14 assists. He had an insane line. So shout out Lance Stephenson.
Back where he belongs.
I had Lance make him dance strumming the air guitar on my weekend review notes in my phone. I just didn't copy him over to my notepad. So yes, I agree. Lance was a revelation in the same game that Kyrie returned. He was the headliner for the first half, but that super powered offense really took over. With that said, I'm not sure about how to begin this discussion. Would we like to just say who do we think is sitting best among the teams that are really on the bottom of the barrel?
I feel like we should just go through them one by one and then circle back and say how we think their future setup like after discussion of each team. I don't know if you
Okay.
like that approach.
I like that approach. I also think that relying purely on just which teams are on the bottom of the standings does not correctly portray which teams are actually rebuilding. So I think an important framework to really lay down first is which teams are actually rebuilding. So my rebuilding teams include the Houston Rockets, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Sacramento Kings, the San Antonio Spurs, the Detroit Pistons, the Orlando Magic, and then I don't think I'm putting anyone else in rebuilding in the East. Are the Raptors a rebuilding team? I don't think so.
No, I think they're too far in the process to be considered a rebuild. Plus,
so how many was that?
Right now, right?
1, 2.
Yeah, if they were rebuilding, then the Siakam or Van Vliet would be out of there already.
Yeah, agreed.
So
which like
I believe that was 7 teams.
Yeah, I include the Pacers in my list, but not the Spurs. So I think that's probably just out of respect to San Antonio.
And I was very conservative. I thought of like the rebuild and like the bottom of the barrel teams as teams that came into this season already knowing that they were going to be god awful. So I focused on the big 5, the Magic, Thunder, Pelicans, Rockets, and Pistons, but I'm more than happy to expand that.
I think that's fine. I think the teams that are on the outside, like you don't know whether to consider them a rebuild or not a rebuild, kind of like is damning for them in the framing of the discussion, because that's more like a team that you left off, like the Kings. Like the Kings are rebuilding, but they've been rebuilding for forever and they're just not doing a good job. So we probably shouldn't waste too much airtime on them. But I do think that those 5 teams, OKC, Houston, Orlando, Detroit, what was the 5th one? Pelicans?
Pelicans, yeah. Which they should be better, but they're clearly a bottom of the barrel team. So
out of those 5 teams, which team has the most interest? Not necessarily do you think is the best rebuild. I'm most interested with Detroit for obvious reasons, but I think OKC has the most factors to talk about.
We should talk about Cade more.
Yes, we're going to talk about Cade plenty. The Oklahoma City Thunder, led by Sam Presti, have how many first-round draft picks in the next 7 years? 18?
A lot. I have extra picks, so like the picks that they have from other teams. Do you want me to go through? I guess I'll be quick. 2022 Clippers, 2022 Suns, 23. They have a swap with the Celtics. They have a Wiz pick. They have a Rockets pick in 24, a Jazz in 24, a swap in 25 with a couple teams, Sixers in 25. These are all first rounds. Right. And then 26 Houston and Clippers. So and then on top of their own picks, which is insane.
Right. So they have the biggest war chest in the league. They have a top, I don't know, at worst 30-ish player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have some fun other pieces like Lou Dort, who I'm sure contending teams that are trying to get over the hunt have been dialing Presti's phone like crazy, trying to get him on their roster. I don't think that many of the other players on the team, besides rookie sensation Josh Giddey, are worth talking about. Mm-hmm. So really the pillars that they have moving forward once their rebuild is complete is those 3 guys. So if we're framing those 3 guys and a million draft picks, how do we feel like the strategy, where they are now, and just the outlook for the Thunder is just overall in this discussion and obviously in comparison to the other teams?
All right. So for me, like to get out of the dumpster and be a successful, potential, I don't know, competitive playoff team, you need a couple things. First, you need a guy that's going to be a perennial all-star. So like maybe a top 25 player, at least one to build your franchise around. And I like what they have in SGA. I'm not sure if he's like a perennial all-star. He's always kind of like fringe outside of it. I think Josh Giddey's a really cool player. I've finally tuned into some Thunder basketball, and like the way he puts the ball, man, it's like on a string. It's amazing. But for me, I still think they need, unless SGA takes another leap forward, they need to capitalize on one of these picks coming up and getting a absolute dead-on franchise leader. So for me, it's a lot about how does Sam Presti utilize these picks? And another thing to consider, if they're ready to move on, I think this is something that maybe the Thunder aren't thinking of just yet. But once they say, all right, we're done rebuilding, they have all these picks. Don't have to use them. You can find another team that's ready to dump and rebuild and get yourself a superstar. So I really like their position because they have so much flexibility.
Yeah, I feel great about Oklahoma City. I think that Shea, like thinking about Shea as your team leader, I thought to last year's finals, and you have the one approach of the Giannis, get on my back, I'm carrying us all the way. And I don't think Shea can get there, but you look at the Phoenix setup where you kind of have the 1A, 1B, and I think that the best version of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, if he's the best player on the team, but the number 2 player is very close to him, then I think Shea could lead an ensemble to a finals appearance, maybe a title. In terms of that supporting cast, I think Giddy, we've seen some growing pains. I don't know if I'm as high on him as OKC was to pick him 6th, I think, last year in the draft. Shay, you mentioned Lou Dort. He's only 22 years old, so they could trade him and add to the stockpile of picks, but at the same time, he's young. He has a ton of potential. We've seen him show up in the playoffs already. So I think that's a guy who is not going to be a star, but definitely a good number of a supporting cast for years to come. Trey Mann, they picked him, shooter off the bench, kind of just a role player, but it's nice to have. And then the other thing that I really love about Oklahoma City that's important to consider as we talk about these rebuilding teams is just organizational competence. And you got Sam Presti, who has knocked draft picks out of the park throughout his career. He's came so close, but so far. And then to have gone this far into the tank, he's got the support of ownership. He's not going to do a panic trade like you might have seen in other situations that throw off the entire rebuild. And then total homer take here, but I do love Coach Mark Daigneault. With this a really bad roster, they're like winning too many games. And I think that says a lot about a coach that can win a game with like a G League team.
I'm with you for sure. I've been incredibly impressed with Daigneault so far. And I think OKC, when you just think about how the discussion around these teams on the bottom of the barrel goes, I feel like their outlook is much rosier than the other teams down here because of the way it's covered and because of that organizational stability that you said and you just mentioned. Daniel LaRue, one of his like more famous idioms is that ownership is the most competitive advantage in the league. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And through that prism, when you're thinking about how to improve a team that's either rebuilding or even whatever, at any point, there's 3 ways to improve a team. You can improve a team through a trade, you can improve a team through the draft, and you can improve team through free agency. And I think with the majority of these teams, maybe Houston does not count, but majority of teams and a lot of the teams that we look at for examples of rebuilds in the past, they need to compensate for either being a weak market, smaller market with more aggression in terms of trading and free agency. I mean, in trading and the draft. And if they have the market, then that's somewhere where they can be more aggressive with free agency and trading. So I think because of where OKC is, we know that it's very unlikely that someone's going to be willing, a max type guy is going to be willing to go there. I think stockpiling draft picks where it's still a far cry and it's a long shot to get a superstar top 10, 15 player in the league, I think that's their best chance. It's also very important that the communication from the top of the ladder to the bottom is cohesive and that the team is well knit, even when they're going through some tough times, because the losses are going to pile up. They obviously have in recent years for the Thunder. So when you listen to Shea talk, when you listen to Lou Dort talk, when you listen to Daigneault talk, Presti talk, they're all on the same page. They know what the vision is. They know what the course is that they need to travel on. And I think that they're sitting really, really nicely, especially because of what the strengths look like at this point for the 2022 draft and the 2023 draft. So if this team right now that has Giddy, Shea, and let's just say Dort, those are the only 3 guys, maybe something crazy happens with Baisley, maybe Poku actually develops into being something, who knows? But we know that they have 3 guards. They got 3 guards that are going to be at worst a strong rotation player in the NBA for the years to come. I think Shea's only 23 years old. I think he could be a top 15 player in the league at some point. So in this next 2 drafts, if they get a top 3 pick, which they need to be gunning for, which is why in previous weeks when I was saying that they were sitting around 6 or 7, that should make them really nervous. But as long as they get a top 3 pick and can land one of those 3 guys that's available this year, and if then they can pair him with if they can pair him with Wembanyama next year, then their rebuild is done and they can trade their picks away for rotation players and try and cultivate the youth they have on their roster. So I think they're sitting pretty because of the amount of draft picks they have. If they do end up with like the 5th pick, why couldn't they trade 5, 19, and 22 for the 3rd pick? You know what I mean? So having this many assets is helpful along the course when you're hamstrung by being in a shitty market where someone doesn't want to play. So I trust Presti to make the right moves. They value the right types of players, and I think that their evaluation as well as ability to develop players in-house has been proven out to be pretty strong so far. So I rank them probably at the top of the teams in terms, I think, how they're sitting, and I think it's mostly because of organizational stability and the number of draft picks. But you do have to say that, I don't know, is Shea the second best player out of these 5 teams when Zion is healthy? Like, so they check all the boxes. It's just they're not a big market.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to also add is I know you keep saying the word organizational stability, and I'm looking at these other bottom of the barrel teams, and I don't know if it's just because I don't know much about the Thunder, but I don't feel like the Thunder have like a toxic culture. Like they still have a good, hardworking culture. Guys are improving year after year. You don't see a lot of outbursts per se. Like, you know, Pelicans, you have the Zion situation, and the Rockets, obviously, we saw it happen a couple weeks ago with Kevin Porter Jr. I just feel like even though they have a losing mentality and they're looking for picks, the players are still working hard. You're seeing improvements year in and year out. So it gives you hope that once it's time to turn the switch and become a competitive team, they can come together and be cohesive and not just be toxic. Because, like, look at Minnesota. Like, they're not in our discussion today. They're still not a great team, but it took them so long to get out of the gutter because just it's such a bad culture that guys were not getting better. And I don't see that with the Thunder, which is a good sign.
Right. So recently, like before the season started, Zach Lowe was saying, I don't know, this team might not win 10 games. People were freaking out after they lost by 73 to Memphis, who is a team that can be tied into talking about what a successful rebuild might look like. They got a lot of comparisons, OKC did, to the process 76ers. And I think the biggest difference there is because that 76ers team had no consistency of organizational stability. And the nonsense that was going around that team was always a headache and was always in headlines for the wrong reason. And even though I think that their approach was correct, I think it was clear that mandate from the top to the bottom of the ladder was confuddled and messed up. And I think that they weren't willing enough to be committed to the correct strategy, so it kind of crumbled. So OKC rebuild is probably somewhere between the outrageous process of just trading as many picks as possible and somewhere like Memphis, where they prioritize specific types of mentalities and people and the players they're drafting. They do a lot of work in scouting. They need to get lucky in a couple lotteries for them to be able to land a player of a high enough caliber to bring them to the next level. So I think their rebuild, in comparison to ones we've seen in the past, is kind of like an amoeba of a lot of them, because, I mean, this is the amount of draft picks this team has is something we have never seen this before. So it's really weird to compare it into what happened in the past, but I would say it's split. It's like a good organization version of the Sixers. So, like, you got to think positively, because the Sixers got probably the unluckiest of any rebuilding team in the past 10 years. They've been the most unlucky. The amount of nonsense that's happened to them.
And the Sixers kind of like blazed the trail for OKC to do this, because the backlash against Hinkie, if that didn't occur, then maybe Hinkie stays and all of the riffraff that followed his exit, because that's really the starting point. He obviously had some injuries, but the starting point is Hinkie leaving. So I think in a way we've kind of gotten over the outcry against tanking. Tanking is here, and the Sixers made it easier for Presti to do the 2.0 version. Similar, it's almost like LeBron did the decision, and that made it easier for KD to then go to Golden State in the future.
All right, so we all have OKC ranked among those teams as a rebuilding team. Yes.
Just a quick question for you guys.
Yes.
Do you think Mark Dagnall enjoys his job? Like, he has great security probably because they know, like, the organization has no expectations, but God, it has to be just tough to get out of bed every morning knowing that you're going to be a loser.
Listen, Mark Dagnall's from Leominster, Massachusetts. We are a tough people. And Mark Dagnall goes out there, he gets the best out of his roster, and he knows what's coming.
Did not know he was a mask guy.
OKC's first. Biddies, who is your second favorite, most promising rebuild?
Oh, I struggled with
tough
this
now.
one. I struggled with it really badly. But ultimately, as I think the very first thing that Steve said was you need to have the guy to have a successful rebuild. And the guy who has been closest out of all these teams to being the best player in the world is Zion Williamson. And yeah, I just had to put New Orleans there, despite all of the other reasons to definitely not choose them. They got the first step out of the way, and if they can right the ship and make him happy and healthy, then all of a sudden life gets a lot easier.
Right. I had them third, but I think they're also incredibly interesting. Obviously, they have the guy. Whether he's going to play in an NBA game this season, we don't know yet. But Zion has flashed that he's good enough to be a top 10 player in the league. That's the most important thing you need to grab if you want to rebuild from bad to good. The problem with the Pelicans is the organizational part and is the market part. So those are two pretty big restrictions on my confidence for their ability to turn it around completely. They have a lot of draft picks. They did the draft pick route with the bounty they got from the Anthony Davis deal and from Milwaukee for the Drew Holiday trade. Both of those packages, the yield isn't going to be anything crazy, but it's the type of trade fodder that you would hope you would be able to swing into a package here and there to get the appropriate surrounding players. It just makes me nervous overall because I don't know if I trust David Griffin. It's almost like in his last stop, he kind of lucked his way into some good chemistry. Some of the right pieces worked out, even if they were kind of an awkward choice. And now we're seeing some head scratching trades. The transactions we've seen from him in New Orleans have been largely bad, and he's like giving up on Lonzo, the transition of players on their bench. Obviously, Herb Jones is a hit. He's been awesome. He's been a revelation, probably one of the 30 best defenders in the NBA already as a rookie. He's been great. I like Trey Murphy, the young guy they have, who was their was he first round pick? I think he got picked first round. So they have some interesting things. I just think purely because I don't trust the Benson's interest in the Pelicans. I don't trust Griffin's ability to navigate the team out of it. And the Zion stuff makes me nervous. It makes me nervous about his health. It makes me nervous about his desire to play there long term. I hate trying to break up star young players with small market teams, but Zion hasn't given us any credence to think that he's impassioned to be the best that he can be for New Orleans. So until we see that, I'm more iffy than I am on another team, which is why I have them 3, but 3 for an obvious reason. It's purely just because Zion's awesome and they have a good amount of draft capital.
So the good and the bad. So the good is that, I saw a tweet a couple weeks ago from Stan Van Gundy, Stan the Man, former Orlando Magic head coach, also former Pelicans head coach. And he pointed out that, we look at Zion and we're like, good God, he's been hurt the entirety of like the first 3 years and he's never played. He's missing so many games. This guy's going to be a bust. But he pointed out that Joel Embiid in his first 3 seasons missed more games than Zion. And we all thought the Joel Embiid thing would never work out at that point, and that it was just going to be a complete disaster. And look what happens. Now he's one of the better players in the league. I don't know where you want to rank him, but anyone would want him. So I'm not giving up on Zion yet. However, the difference is that Joel Embiid, his injuries weren't self-inflicted. And I'm not saying Zion's doing it to himself, but his weight gain is not helping his injury situation at all. So I don't know if he's going to turn it around. For me, I had a tough time picking the second best franchise. I guess I would not. I would put the Pelicans probably third. I'm with Shea on this one. And the thing is that yes, Zion is that piece. He's that piece that if everything goes right, he can propel the Pelicans to the top. However, I am just worried that piece is not going to work out, and you're not going to have him for the long term either. By he's going to leave, or he's just going to be injury prone.
Right.
So that for me, that's the biggest thing. And then if Zion's out, you got Brandon Ingram, and he's not going to carry the team. He's proven this year he's not the guy to carry.
He's been good. He's been good this year, but you're right.
He's a good player, but him alone does not equate to winning. Like they are one of the worst teams in the league with him at the helm.
Right. Before we jump into your number 2 team and trying to look back on previous rebuilds and like comparisons to what teams we're dealing with right now, the Pelicans are an unusual case because they're a team that's a small market, but also a small market team that had crazy luck. What were they? The 7th best odds the year that they landed Zion. Jumping up to the number 1 pick was very unforeseen. And then the circumstances that allowed them to get the treasure chest of picks that they have, not as good as OKC's, but probably the 2nd best in the league, was peculiar because of having Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis. Thinking of previous ones, Chicago was a nightmare, and they lucked into Derrick Rose. I think they were around the similar odds. I think they had the 7th or 8th odds, and they got Derrick Rose. But they did a more careful job of surrounding their players with good complementary pieces, and I trust that front office at the time. And in retrospect, I feel like their moves were more cohesive and made more sense than what we're seeing from New Orleans so far. So in thinking about like a smaller market team that like doesn't have the flexibility free agent wise that obviously Chicago would, they're just hamstrung a lot more than other teams that have been in similar situations in the past. So unless Zion dramatically changes his approach to his health, which I'm sure he's trying, and comes back dedicated to making it work in New Orleans, and David Griffin is able to capitalize all of these assets that the team has and be able to leapfrog issues and roadblocks like the size of the market, I'm iffy. And that's why my number 2 team is Cade Cunningham's Detroit Pistons. Steve, who is your second team?
Cade Moore.
I actually am going to go back. I'm going to go back and put the Pelicans number 2. I've thought about it more.
Okay.
Because you know what?
Argument.
I was thinking about the Pistons, and here's the thing with the Pistons. I know you love Cade Cunningham. That's your guy.
Wish I talked about Cade more.
And you could talk about Cade all day if you wanted to. But the thing is, we are basing the Pistons' future success on Cade Cunningham growing and developing and being a top 20 player, which he might be. But at this point, I am not that sold on him. And outside of Cade Cunningham, who are they really going to be building around? Let me ask you that.
They're going to be bad. They're going to be one of the 3 worst teams this year. So they're hoping that they're going to get one of those 3 big guys. Okay. So you can just put those in as one of the building pieces around Cade.
Right.
So
and that's a luck thing. That's a luck thing. Because let's say the Pistons finish with the 2nd or 3rd worst record. I'm a Magic fan, man. I had the 3rd worst record last year, and we got jumped twice, unfortunately. Things happen in the draft or the lottery.
For sure.
And then if you look at the Pistons' actual treasure chest of picks, it is pretty barren. They have only, outside of theirs, the 2022 first from OKC that's lottery protected, and that thing is going to be protected. So I don't really know where else they're going to help from.
They don't have crazy assets in terms of draft pick compensation. I'm sure they're probably going to be landing some combo of young player and draft pick for Jeremy Grant at this upcoming trade deadline. I think that they should entertain trading other young flyers on their roster. I think Killian Hayes could succeed as more of a bench guard, but maybe another team would be willing to give up a handful of 2nd-round picks. Maybe a contract dump can be combined with a 1st-round pick for Killian Hayes or something crazy like that. I would be in asset accumulation mode if I was Troy Weaver and the Detroit Pistons. Everything I've seen so far from Troy Weaver makes me like Troy Weaver. I think he's made smart decisions, nothing crazy. The draft picks have been overall pretty solid. I mean, Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart were 2 huge hits in the latter half of the 1st round last draft, not Cade's draft. Obviously, Killian Hayes was the earliest one, and he's been kind of more blah than good. But the vote of confidence for them being 2 is purely because they don't have the issues in the front office that I think the teams below them do. And I think that they have a leader in their locker room and on the court that none of these 5 teams have. I think because Cade's probably one of the 5 to 15 highest IQ players in the league, I think he is dedicated to a rebuild. He is impassionate about the culture of Detroit basketball, and he's pushing all the correct things. The fan base is surrounding him and loves him. I think that we're seeing some better play from players like Sadiq Bey and Josh Jackson and random guys that were varying from outcasts to young players that's had flashes in their rookie year, and they look a lot more mellowed down, dependable after half a season playing alongside Cade. So I think the pieces that you have that are on the roster right now it's Cade, Sadiq Bey, and probably Isaiah Stewart. I don't think there's really much outside of that. And then it's the same thing as the Thunder. It's just they have less ability to move up and down, so they're depending more on their actual own picks. So they're hoping just for Chet or Jabari or Paolo, and then next year they're hoping for another guy. I think Detroit is going to be more likely to be able to land a free agent than someone like Oklahoma City. They've had not that bad luck in terms of landing free agents in the past, and I just trust the things that I care about to work out for them more than I do the other teams.
I think after that impassioned defense of your Pistons, I'm going to move them down to number 4 on my list.
Oof.
Okay, that's reasonable. So where do you have your Orlando Magic?
Did you let Biddies go on the Pistons? Did you?
Yeah.
No, I'm not, because one of my notes is that Basketball Reference lists Cade's nickname as Motorcade, and I was really excited to drop that. But yeah, I think that
you missed that. That was amazing.
If they're able to spin Jeremy Grant, if the Bulls are all in and you get a Pat Williams for Jeremy Grant, then that's a home run. I kind of am giving them a little bit of a TBD on the organizational competence grade, because Cade was such a bailout. They really had nothing going on for them until they landed that pick. So, we got to see how it goes. Is Dwayne Casey the right coach, or was it more so like a different generation of players is who he struck a chord with? And then the other thing I'll say is they don't have a treasure chest of picks, but they're going to have a high pick this year. And I think sometimes we get I think we overvalue a treasure chest where it's like, congratulations, you have Milwaukee's picks for Giannis's entire prime. You're getting nothing out of that. Whereas Detroit's about to make a top 3 pick, and if they land a guy like Paolo, then all of a sudden they have 2 really great young players. And I think Detroit's in a really good spot. I have them at 3, definitely thought about putting them at 2.
Detroit also acquired Bull today, so future pillar of the franchise, Bull. How could we?
They're
forget?
number 1 now.
I love Bull.
Taco's a free agent now. Can we get a little Bull and Taco, same team?
I love that. I would hope so.
Well, let's go.
So I'm assuming that means you have Orlando 3rd, Steve.
Yeah, just to spite you. I think Detroit's better than Orlando. Actually, no, I don't know. I'm going back and forth. Here's the thing about Orlando. Maybe I'm just a homer and I love my Magic, but I feel pretty confident, or not confident. I feel positive about what they're doing as an organization. I just don't know what's going to happen when these guys get back from injury. So like, they've made the right moves. They've taken their players that they feel confident about, and they've given them extensions. They re-signed Isaac I don't know if it was a couple years. It feels like it was forever ago now, but maybe a year ago. They re-signed Fultz for another 4 years. They re-signed Wendell Carter this season. So they're finding guys that they feel confident building around. None of these guys are probably franchise pillars. I think the problem with the Magic is you need 2 things with a rebuild. You need a top 30, 25 player to make your franchise player, and you need excellent. Well, let me just finish. And I think this is my personal opinion. And you need excellent role players, not role players, but guys that can fill out a roster and be contributors every day, night in and night out. And I think the Magic have a lot of guys that are really good NBA players and contributors, but they have no ace. They have a lot of 10s. They have a lot of jacks. They have some 9s. They have some high cards. They have no ace in their deck right now. I know you like Jalen Suggs and you think he might be the next big thing. I haven't seen it. I think he's in a younger version of Marcus Smart at this point. Franz Wagner has been very, very good, and I've really been happy about him. And I don't know, like I think the Magic's best hope to get out of the gutter is they're going for that number 1 pick. And if they can strike gold with that pick and get the guy to build around and have a franchise player, I think they're in a really good spot. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a homer and I love my Magic and I think more highly of them, but they have at least 5 or 6 players that I feel confident playing night in and night out. And you got Cole Anthony, who out of nowhere, he looks like Freddie Van Vliet Jr. Don't give me that face. He looks just like Van Vliet on that court right now. He is money from deep. He can create space off the dribble. I love what Cole Anthony's become. I like all my guys, but I just don't feel like I have a stud yet.
Yeah, they should trade high on Cole Anthony. I vacillated between having Orlando third above the Pelicans, and at the end of the day, it just came down to Zion. But I like all their individual pieces. Like, I really like Wendell Carter. I really like Gary Harris. I like Fultz. I like Bamba and Jonathan Isaac. I like all of these players, and you're right that none of them is going to be a top 30 guy. Maybe a handful of them could be in between 30 and 50, and those players are valuable to have. But I don't know about the direction. Who's the GM? Weltman?
Yeah.
It's the former Bucks guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So his time with Milwaukee was pretty successful. I mean, he kind of navigated that rebuild over there. There was a lot of luck that went into that. Cough, Giannis at 15 or 14 or whatever. And there were some misses, namely Jabari over Embiid. But I think overall, the stability aspect of judging him and his previous stop, I think that I'm more confident with them for sure over New Orleans and over Houston. And as Biddy said, Detroit is more of a TBD because Weaver hasn't been doing it for as long. But I feel like Orlando is just stuck on the treadmill. I don't know if they can get out of their own way. I mean, they're perennially one of the 7 worst teams, but they're never one of the 3 worst teams. It's like the team is struggling to be bad enough to get back the reward that you get from being awful. And often they're that bad, and then they just get unlucky in the lottery. And I understand there's nothing you could do about it, but I just don't know if I don't know if they can get off that treadmill.
I will say they are running full speed off the treadmill this year, because I know for a fact you're telling me Jonathan Isaac needs 2 seasons to recover. He is not playing this year, and they are holding him out on purpose. Him, Fultz is not coming back. They have guys on the bench that are like contributors and like legitimate role players. They're just ing every day for the whole season. Like, what are you guys doing? They don't want to win. They are going hard at the number 1 pick. So I think they are trying to be not mediocre anymore. Be really bad to be really good.
And I think a comparison for them is that they've got the supporting cast ready to go for when they get the number 1 guy, sort of similar to how LaMelo Ball comes into Charlotte and they take off a bit. He ended up getting hurt his rookie year. But now that he's back, they're right in the thick of the playoff hunt. You know, might get into the 6th seed if they get hot. So I think there's that similarity that I think of with Orlando, but I don't think there's one guy who could be the guy. Maybe Jalen Suggs. He's been a little bit of a disappointment so far for me, who was pretty high on him coming out of Gonzaga. And then I do see it as a potential, like, we could lure a free agent spot. It's warm. The income tax. I think there's the potential there that if they have a good thing going on, then they can get somebody to come. They got Rashard Lewis, who is not the greatest signing of all time, but he was an all-star player.
But they already had a guy at that point. Like, Dwight was there. They had their franchise guy. I think if they do lure someone, they're going to end up by overpaying someone, and they're not going to be a guy that wants to be there to win rings. It's going to be a guy that wants to get paid.
They also got Grant Hill.
Yeah, I mean, out of these 5 teams, Orlando and Houston are the best markets and are the most likely to draw in a player. The only reason we haven't seen them draw players in free agency is because the teams have sucked. So there's no recent example of a big free agent that they've landed, because no big free agent wants to go for the 5th worst team in the league in the Orlando Magic that can't get out of their own way. I think that even if free agency is something that you can look upon fondly once you get closer to the edge of being out of your rebuild, I'm nervous because it's going to be at least another year that even if they get the number 1 overall pick, I've talked about how I don't think whatever player it is that goes 1 is going to be that top 15, top 20 guy in the league. So if it's another year, even if they have the best case scenario, they're just getting another rotation guy. That's more treadmill. That sounds like more treadmill to me. So I love Franz. Franz is easily the brightest part of this roster by far. He's way better than I imagined. I think like Matt Penny that does the podcast with Sam Vecini is the only guy that I've heard had him in like the top 8. And I thought that was ludicrous at the time, but he's not a star player. He's like a connecting player. Like he's going to be a 15-year veteran that can make at best one all-star team, but he's going to be someone that every team wants. So I don't know where that top flight player comes from. I don't know if maybe it is in 2 years where they just have developed guys and they have 4 players ranked between 30 and 60 in the NBA. And then all of a sudden, Karl Anthony Towns in free agency says, I love Orlando. I want to go hang out with the Lopez brothers in Disney World. But I just don't see – I feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is further away for Orlando than the other teams.
Right. And I know we fell in love with this draft class that just happened, but like last year's draft class, everyone poo-pooed, said it's a bad draft class. There's no top guys. And look who we have out of that. Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball. We can poo-poo the upcoming draft class all we want, but you never know. Like there could be a guy to change a franchise there.
You can hope. So does that mean that we all have Houston 5th?
I have Houston 4.
You have Houston 4.
I have Orlando 5.
Oh,
wow, no love for Orlando. Love.
With the case being that they got Jalen Green. I think Jalen Green is currently enrolled in the Devin Booker School of Development, and he's just going to have the ball in his hand a lot. They're going to lose a lot of games. They're going to bring in high draft picks. Can Christian Wood turn into some additional assets for them down the road? If I'm a Houston fan, then I hope so. Can they hit on a guy that's already on their roster to be I don't think any of them have all-star potential, but like quality starter in a Jayshawn Tate or Kevin Porter or Alperen Şengün? I think there's the potential there. And then looking at their draft stash, the Harden trade I thought was going to do better for them, but actually they had to erase some of the awfulness of the Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul trade, which I don't think Daryl Morey and James Harden get enough blame for, because it was James Harden's inability to coexist, and then Daryl Morey made the trade. But aside from that, I think just having a guy with potential like Jalen Green in the building is a necessary first step to feel good about where you're headed.
You nailed it 100%. When I was listing down like past 10 years or so teams that you could consider having gone through a rebuild from awful bottom of the league to having several awesome players and competing to be one of the last 4 teams or one of the better teams in the league based off their own expectations. The team that first popped into my mind for any of these teams in comparison to an old team was these Houston Rockets with the Devin Booker Phoenix Suns. It's exactly that team. It's a team that is going to need to draft well and has a desirable market, but they're going to need to overcome bad organizational stability. They're going to need to overcome problems in the front office. I don't know how I feel about Silas yet. I feel like he hasn't had long enough leash to really prove anything as a coach, but I think that the talent that you have with Jalen Green, the swings that you have with some of those younger players that I think some could shake out. I think similar to Jeremy Grant, Christian Wood is likely a guy that we're going to see be turning into a first-round draft pick come February for this team, and I think that's smart. I think they should give the ball to Şengün some more so they can lose some more basketball and he can develop. So I think that it's going to take continued develop from the players that they have in their system, more draft picks to land, hopefully, and then once you get to a point where you're fighting for that 10, 9, 8 spot, when Jalen Green is closer to being the 30th best player in the league rather than, I don't know, what is he now, the 110th best player in the league, 130th best player in the league, then that's when you hope that you land the equivalent of a Chris Paul in free agency, because you have a desirable market and you have a team that has all the supporting pieces, maybe a top guy, but could just really use an all-star veteran presence to push you over the top. So I think that Houston, even though I have them ranked 5th, I think that there's plenty to be excited about. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Kevin Porter Jr. He's clearly a head case. That's been his reputation since USC. I'm super curious what the object is he threw in the locker room. I hope it was like tortilla soup, like J.R. Smith threw, but I don't know. But I think a lot of these things, this is highlighting and profiling what goes wrong when your organization doesn't have the cohesiveness from the top down. Whereas you're seeing across the lane, teams like OKC and Detroit, they don't have those problems. Orlando, that storyline, maybe it's because there's not higher profile players. They don't care about it. But Houston and the Pelicans, they have these issues left and right. So they're really going to need to overcome bigger roadblocks than what the other rosters have in their way. So I feel like, and it sucks, I feel like as I talk my way through it, I want to lower the Pelicans every time. And it's just, I don't know what to do with Zion. What do I do with Zion? The only reason they're not 5th is just because Zion exists. Like, they are so clearly in the worst situation. It's just they have Zion. It's very hard to parse.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. If Zion just disappeared today, I would probably have the Pelicans here 5th. But for me, the Rockets are 5th because they're just dysfunctional. Like, your best players probably are Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, and Christian Wood at this point, right? I mean, Kevin Porter Jr., you can't count on him day in and day out. I don't know if he wants to be there anymore or like where his head's at, how much he's going to improve. He's had issues with the Cavs. Now he's had issues with the Rockets. Christian Wood's another guy where he comes from an organization. I'm going to bash Detroit again, but like, that's not the best organization. He came from losing in Detroit to losing in the Houston Rockets, and he chose to set out the second half of a game. Like, I see guys that don't want to be there long term that I don't think you can count on. And then if you try to trade Christian Wood, teams are going to know that you are selling lower than his value is, and you're not going to get as much back probably. And then another thing, like Jalen Green, like, I know he is a second overall pick with a lot of not accolades, but potential. Every draft, no matter how far you go back, there's going to be 3 or 4 guys at the top that you all love, and 1 or 2 are just going to bust out and not be the guy you thought he was going to be. And I'm looking at Jalen Green right now. He hasn't taken that leap yet. I'm sure he still has a lot of potential to go, but I don't see him succeeding in Houston. I'm just going to be a poo-poo on that one and just be negative about Houston. And then the last thing, as far as draft capital goes, I think Biddies nailed it right in the head, where the picks they've received from other teams, mostly Bucks and Nets, like those picks are going to be in the 20s, if not the very end of the first round. And then the picks that they have themselves, they traded a ton of their first round picks to the Thunder. And granted, you're going to say, well, they must be protected. They're only top 4 protected. So they're either going to be really shitty or they're going to give up their first round picks in the near future. So I don't know. I just think that it's just a toxic culture. I don't see the superstar potential in their roster, and they don't have a ton of draft capital to like move around and make moves in the future. So I'm out on the Rockets.
One of those Brooklyn picks, maybe multiple, they goes to 26, 27, and you want to place some bets on where Kyrie Irving's going to be in 2027. If KD still wants to be there, he left the best basketball team ever.
That's true.
So, is James Harden even going to care enough at that point? So some of those picks may turn out to be some real top level assets that could push them over the edge if that big domino of is Jalen Green a legit player pans out for Houston's favor.
I think even as a believer of Jalen Green, I think you're too low on him, Steve. But even if he has a outlier growth curve like Devin Booker did, and he becomes a 28 point per game scorer, which I think he has the capacity to do, they still need a lot of things to go right outside of that, him being that star, for them to be able to be in playoff contention, never mind championship contention. So I think they're the obvious 5th choice. They do have some things going for them, but I think overall, just in the framework that we've laid out, I think they're clearly, of all rebuilding teams, sitting the worst. And I think that says something in contrast to what it would in previous years, because a lot of the teams would just be I don't know what the right saying would be, a boat without a sail, just kind of bobbing around doing nothing. Even Houston, who is literally, we chose as the worst sitting rebuilding team, they have things to look forward to. They have things to be optimistic about. They have draft picks, even if they are only going to be in the 22 to 28 range. They have draft picks that aren't theirs coming up in the upcoming drafts. They have a desirable market, and they have some young guys that are exciting. So even the worst team in the league is still brimming with possibilities. Before what do you got? Something else on Houston?
Just one little tidbit. So I know you love your Excel sheets and doing these weird analysis of the league. I started my own, and it was about it's looking into NBA drafts for the past 30 years and just seeing the success rate of each individual draft pick. And for some reason, man, the number 2 pick is cursed. Like I know John Morant looks like he's a surefire thing or two, but there are so many number 2 picks. For some reason, number 2, a lot of guys bust out at number 2. And I'm looking at, I think it's jinxed maybe, but Jalen Green, he's the number 2 pick in the draft. I don't know. It scares me for some reason.
It's the new Darko Milicic.
There's picks every year that are bad. One year, when you can pick out plenty of number 1 pick, number 3 picks that are all terrible. Actually, number 3 is pretty good.
Number,
Three's great. Three's good. 3 always hits. Tatum, Jalen.
Both days.
Before we jump to your trivia, a team that could possibly be in this discussion as soon as the end of February, if Portland was to dump off of Dame and CJ, they got back, I don't know, 4 first-round draft picks and Ben Simmons or something like that, and maybe Tyrese Maxey. How would a roster that had Simmons, Maxey, they're all their own picks, some picks from Sixers, and then maybe a poo-poo platter from some other teams that they got back from Yusuf Nurkic and CJ McCollum. Where do you think they would slot into those 5 teams we just discussed?
I'll let Biddies take this first, but I feel like if I'm the Blazers, I don't want a guy like Ben Simmons back, because Ben Simmons is, even though he has time, he has stuff to develop in his game, I feel like he's more of a win now player. And I want a guy even farther behind in development, someone that's like super raw, like first, second year in the league.
Well, how about this? Take Ben Simmons and just get Ben Simmons back out on the floor. And Ben Simmons is a basketball player, not a name. And then you could trade him again and bring back even more young assets. So I think if you want, he's what, 25 years old. He's still very young. Still has a lot of good years ahead of him. So I think you can take him. You can see what you have of leaning into him as the top guy, or he's just going to be out there playing really great defense, being a menace on the fast break, and then you can trade him to somebody else, and you're not at the disadvantaged position that Philadelphia is. And also Philadelphia refuses to take a youth-based package for him. So I think that they would position really well. And yeah, I mean, I almost feel like this discussion has made me do a bit of like a coin flip of Detroit, New Orleans. And I feel like Portland would be right in that mix as well. That like 2-3.
Have they declared a sitting GM yet, or is it still interim?
I think it's still the interim, which
that's bad. That's so bad. What are they doing? I don't know. That's crazy. But I think that's a good wrap on these bottom of the barrel rebuilding rosters. OKC, clearly the cream of the crop of these teams. They're really going to be kicking themselves in the next 2 years if it shakes out in the lottery the same way it did this past year. In a fantastic draft, they had the opportunity to have the number 1 pick and the number 5 pick. That was a more likely scenario than getting only the 6th pick, which is what happened. So hopefully luck shifts in their favor moving forward in this draft and the draft after that, or else their slotting in this list could change come as soon as next year. With that said, let's jump into whatever you got going on over there for some trivia.
All right, so we're going to play a game called Still in the League. And what I'm going to ask you is this player still in the league? So I have an assortment of NBA players, maybe current and former. And most of them were either high draft picks that kind of stuck around the league for a long time. Teams try to see if they'd pan out, or maybe guys that were drafted a little lower, but they just made a name for themselves as a journeyman. So I tried to pick an assortment of names that would ring a bell to maybe a more avid NBA fan. So it's not no names. It's guys you've probably heard before. So I'm going to go back and forth. You're going to go one at a time. I'll give you different players. You're going to answer the question, are they still in the league? And please, if you want to have a funny story about the player, or if you want to just stop and chat about the given player, take your time. There's no rush.
Do we get extra points if we name a team, or if we steal it when the other person can't say whether or not they're in the league?
No steals. You got it. You got to guess.
It's a yes, no.
I'll give you a fractional point if you know exactly where they're playing. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see how this goes. I have a long list, so let's get through it. Shall we start? Who wants to kick us off with "Are we still in the league"?
I'll go
Biddies.
first.
All right, Biddies. The first player is Bismack Biyombo.
Bismack, still in the league.
He just signed
Yes, go ahead.
a contract with the Phoenix Suns.
Hey.
Yeah, he got a 10-day contract from the Suns a little while ago. He played really well this past couple weeks and just got a full season contract. So shout out to Bismack Biyombo, still getting that paycheck. So
Still getting them checked. If you're 7 feet tall, you got a good shot at being.
By the way,
Can you believe that contract after that? What did he have? 26 rebounds in that playoff game, and he just got a $50 million contract
I was
next
just gonna
season.
say that the Orlando Magic,
he's a
foolishly
king.
enough, gave him like $60 million over 4 years because he had one good game with the Raptors. We don't do that anymore. That's why we're not the 5th worst franchise.
That's it.
All right. So Sheamus, you are up. This guy was drafted very high once upon a time. Former number 2 draft pick, Michael Kidd Gilchrist. Is he still in the league?
I'm going to say no, Steve.
No longer in the league. He last played in the 2020 season with the New York Knickerbockers.
Is he playing in Italy, Steve?
Nowhere. He's actually free agent. He had no team assigned to him. All right, so the score is 1-1. What's up?
I said one of the jankiest shot forms in NBA history.
Absolutely. Number 2 pick. See, the number 2 pick, man, does not work out. I'm telling you. All right, Biddies, you are up. A former Celtic great, James Young. Is he still in the league?
Oh, certainly not.
He is not in the league. Do you have a guess of where he's playing? He's playing professional basketball somewhere.
Probably like Turkey.
Shanghai Sharks.
He is playing Tel Aviv in Israel.
Oh,
Yep. Last time, this one was a tough one. Last time that James Young played in the league was 2018. So it's been a while. The 76ers.
There's a it's like Vox or something. There's like a docu-series on YouTube about Marshall Henderson, like the villain from Ole Miss, and he was playing basketball in Iraq, and it was wild. And I kind of wanted to disrespect James Young by saying that James Young was playing in Iraq, but that's why I was like, okay, well,
he's close.
I'll stick in that region, but go with a more respectable basketball league.
All right, so we're perfect 3-0 right now. Shameless, let's see if we get you with this one. James Ennis III, is he still in the league?
James Ennis. Yes, I'm assuming because of COVID, he's in. Yes.
The exact reason because of COVID. He was out of the league to start the year. He just finished up a 10-day contract with the Nets, and I believe today is his last day in the league, finalizing a 10-day contract with the Clippers. So James Ennis still in the league. Wow, 2-2. These are just not hard enough. All right, this one is a good one. I heard this name, Biddies, and I was like, I have no idea if this guy's playing. A guy that was drafted 5th overall in the 2014 draft. He is only 26 years old. Dante Oxum. Oxum, the Australian.
I'm going to say yes, and he's injured.
Already out of the league. He is playing in the league in Barcelona.
Ooh. I've been to FC Barcelona basketball game.
I've been.
Really?
Yeah. It's like a D3 college gym.
Nice. I'm sure it's a fun atmosphere.
They were like banging on drums. Everybody went out at halftime to smoke a cigarette. It was cool.
I love it. That's why he's there. I don't blame him at all. All right, this one another tough one. I try to get tough in the middle for Sheamus. Nick Stauskas.
I'm gonna go with. Oh, I'm gonna go with no, Steve.
COVID edition.
I
He is COVID edition. He's a member of your Miami Heat. He's on a 10-day contract, and I mean it's a good guess, no, because he hadn't played in the NBA since 2019 until now.
I feel like I'm monopolizing the post comments, but my old roommate made our Wi-Fi password Sauced Castillo. If you'll recall, that was kind of Nick Stauskas' a big moment in the league, was that a closed captioning called him Sauce Castillo.
Deep cut. That's a deep cut. All right. Well, luckily you missed. We're still tied 2-2. Let's see. So Biddies, you're up again. Former Magic great Mario Hirschgona.
No way is he in the league.
He should be. He's better than some of these guys being signed. I'm not gonna lie. He played last in 2020. He was good with the Trailblazers. Do you remember he blocked LeBron?
I remember he
Just
blocked
that
LeBron.
block
He dunked
LeBron.
on LeBron in like the same week. It was the same week.
Yeah,
He
he
posted
should still
LeBron
be
and he
in the
dunked.
league.
Yeah.
For that dunk. No, he's not in the league. He's actually playing in Russia right now, which not the place I'd want to be playing my professional basketball. All right, 3-2, Biddies in the lead. This one, I feel like Sheamus is going to nail this one. Mario Chalmers, still in the league, yes or no?
He's in the league.
Little reunion tour with the Miami Heat, is that right?
Heat
Mario Chalmers in the fourth quarter shouldn't be anywhere near the ball.
Yeah, so the funny thing about Mario Chalmers is he is on a 10-day contract with the Heat, but this guy hadn't played professional ball since 2018 with the Grizzlies, so long hiatus, but I guess he kept his legs under him.
He
All
shouldn't
right.
be in the league.
Tied 3-3. We'll just wrap up a couple really quick rapid fire. This one might be one of the toughest ones. I had no idea. Biddies, Etwan Moore, still in the league?
Yes.
He's on the Orlando Magic. I've never seen him play. I watched all every Magic game. Does it count as still being in the league if you're just never playing?
He's getting checks.
Yeah.
He's getting checks. I guess that counts. All right, but he's great job.
Whew.
All right, this one, it's an interesting one for you, Sheamus. Dragon Bender, still in the league.
Absolutely not. He's not in the league.
Why did you say that with such authority?
He stinks. He stinks. He stunk from game one. Never had any potential. Bad.
Yeah, he's 24 years old, already out of the league. He's playing in Israel. All right.
That's where he belongs.
Jesus Christ, just take out Dragon. Dragon Bender, if you're a listener to the My Wheelhouse Basketball podcast, we apologize to you sincerely.
The greatest disappointment of name to comparison of skill ability. Incredible name. 10 out of 10 name. Awful basketball player.
That should be a segment we should do in the future. Great basketball names that were never good. I like that.
Fab Mello. Really let me down.
RIP.
RIP. Jesus Christ, this is getting dark. All right.
Not in the league.
I just put it on my list. Wow, that was the next one. Jesus. All right. We'll do one more each, then sudden death.
It's like penalty kicks.
Yeah. All right. If it's tied after these two, then we go to sudden death. So I believe, Biddies, you are up.
All right.
Jahlil Okafor, still in the league?
Not in the league.
That one's a tough one. I thought he was going to get a 10-day for sure.
I was gonna be like, he's tall. That's how I want Biombo.
These 10 days really throwing us for a loop.
It's tough, man. He actually was on a roster to begin the season, but got waived, and they never looked back. All right, so here's the deal, Shay. Biddies has one on you. You have four. This is the last one for you. If you miss this, you lose. If you make this, we go to PKs. Are you ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
Former Wisconsin great Sam Decker.
He's not in the NBA, Steve.
Do you know where he's playing? That'd be impressive.
France.
Turkey.
Turkey. Come on, it was right there.
All right. We're going to sudden death.
Here's
how it goes. All you got to do is just get one and your opponent misses. and you're in, and you win. All right.
Sudden death is the same thing. We're just gonna keep going. You don't want to just do first person.
First person to get it right.
You're just first person to do this or this. I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll have to look at your hands. All right. Let me pick a good one. All right. Ed Davis.
Same guess. I was first.
Both wrong. This is not how sudden death's supposed to work.
Man,
League.
Who was first? Whose thumb was down first?
My thumb was
We
down.
gotta do one more.
On my computer, my thumb was down.
Both were wrong. No one wins. Get out of
I
here.
was way faster.
Michael Carter Williams. Biddies, you win. He is in the league. He's one of the players that are on the Orlando Magic that is quote unquote injured and has never played a game.
He's a bum.
Biddies, you are the champion of still in the league. Congratulations, sir.
What a day.
Crazy. It's a good segment. I like it. I think we'll probably bring it back in the future. Thank you for hosting this session of My Wheelhouse Trivia. With that said, gentlemen, this Sunday has been awesome chatting basketball with you. Listeners, please listen and rate and review and do all the stuff you're supposed to do on all of the podcast playing networks. Until next time, this is your host, Sheamus from the My Wheelhouse Basketball Podcast. Signing off. Toodaloo.